Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fat Dad Fishing Show. My name is Ed. You guys should all know me. I am the owner of Captain Hank's Tackle. Rich is not with us tonight. He's got some obligations, so he left the reins up to me to run this. So take it easy on me tonight. So tonight I am joined by John, one of our co-hosts.
What's
And
up,
how are you
buddy?
tonight, John?
I am good.
What's
Yourself?
I'm doing well, doing well. Did you get out fishing this weekend or what?
So I went out Friday with Rich. Um, let's see. The weather again forecasted wrong. It's supposed to be 10 mile per hour winds out of the northeast, and now we were talking probably 15, 20 out of the east, creating a little bit of chop. The fog was supposed to lift at 9 o'clock in the morning. I don't think it ever lifted all day. And yeah, I got to try the salty out, and that was a little bit of an experience. Got a little wet. It's a great kayak, don't get me wrong. I do like it. For those conditions, though, I would not take it back out again. So it was a learning experience, which was great. So, how about yourself?
I think you're gonna learn to love that salty, man. Just put some more time in it, and you'll see. For me, it was actually a really good Sunday. I got out with pro staffer Mike. It was very foggy, but it was definitely the day to go out. The wind was flat, dead calm. I mean, I was taking pictures of the windmills; they weren't even spinning. Um, we ended up putting together a two-man limit, but we had to go pretty far in the back. The water's still somewhat cold. Outgoing tide seems to be the key there. But otherwise, it was a good day. Can't complain. Had some dinner and that's that.
Good deal.
So, but yeah, so we have tonight. We are joined by Kristen. She is on the her channel is Philly Fishing Girl. I did some research on her Instagram through over the week, and she is definitely an accomplished fisherwoman. So let's bring her on. Kristen, welcome.
Hey guys, how you
Hey,
doing?
good, good. And yourself?
Pretty good. Can't complain.
Awesome. So, yeah, like I said, we on your Instagram. There's quite a few photos and some awesome catches. You also have a YouTube channel. That's correct, right?
Yep. Philly girl
Cool.
fishing.
Awesome. Um, so let's get started. I guess what got you into fishing and what started this craziness we
I
call
know
a
this
hobby.
hobby slash habits. It's funny. So what actually got me into fishing, and I always tell this story, people look at me like crazy, but it was a car accident. So when I was younger, like probably about 9 years ago, I used to mountain bike a lot. So I'm biking. I would just relax at the creek, take a break, and sit by the water. Drunk driver rear ends me, messes up my back for a while. I still want to sit by the water, and I used to fish when I was a kid with my mom. So I was like, let's try fishing. They have a free fishing day in Philly. Went down to Pennypack Creek, started trying to fish for like little sunnies, and I immediately got hooked. So that escalated to like now I'm on YouTube looking at people like extreme Philly fishing, sea money fishing. Like that's kind of how I kind of learned how to start fishing. So then I got into largemouth bass fishing. And then I started fishing in the river and catching like 5 pound catfish. I'm like, oh, this is great. I should try the boat. And then from there on, I kind of started doing party boats, but I would only go on my birthday in July. And I think I was on the Big Jamaica, and I was slaying them. Like I was pulling up sea bass left and right, left and right. But in the summertime, we could only keep two. So the mate was probably Joe. It was probably Big Joe, and he was like, "Hey, you should probably come like earlier in the season. You can keep more fish the way you're catching fish." I said, "Okay, sure." So started coming in May. Sea bass fishing was fun. I said, "Oh, let's try fluke." Fluke was fun, and it just escalated from there. I'm like fishing for
Snowballed from
everything
there.
now. Yep.
That's awesome. Um, yeah, so tonight's topic is party boat fishing. So I guess we could start there. As far as boats go, what are some of your favorites and what keeps you coming back?
Yeah, I would say probably one of my favorites has to be Jamaica too. And it's really the customer service of the mates that keeps me coming back. So, Chris and Joe, like they're so friendly. They're patient with you. They'll give you tips on how to fish. And for me being kind of new to saltwater fishing, especially deep sea. I've probably only been seriously deep sea fishing for about 4 years, where it was like consistent more than just going one time for a year. Learning techniques, being patient, and just being a cool hang and being so friendly. So I definitely say that's a good boat, and they put you on a fish too. Like that's us last year. I think we saw 2 10-pounders or close to it, close to 10-pounders. So they'll bring up some big flukes. So I definitely like fluke fishing on that boat. Another boat that I really enjoyed was Big Mohawk. That one I enjoyed a lot too. The captains were cool, the mates were cool. I do feel like a lot of different boats have different personalities, if you will, right? Different atmospheres, different vibes. So it depends on what kind of mood you're in or what kind of fish you're going for. You kind of start to learn which boats you want to try.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can imagine it can, some boats can, not be as good at time, especially with the weather and, all the variables that go into it.
Yeah.
What do you got, John? You got anything you want to jump in?
So yeah, I'm actually excited about this stream because it's me and her kind of have the same background in the sense of where we started fishing, and I started in the rivers and the creeks and whatnot, and actually some of the same stomping grounds that you probably tread on. I do Neshaminy Creek, Delaware River, all that stuff. So, and then I started catching striper out of the creeks and the river, and I said, well, you know what? Let me go saltwater fishing for them. It'll be a lot more fun throwing lures after them and everything. After I did that, then I made my way into the party boat scene, the charter boat scene. Boats that I like myself, as long as there's good customer service, it doesn't matter. I'll go back to whatever boat. Preference-wise, I'll go on the Ocean Explorer. They're great customer service. When the Osprey's down, I'd like to go on their boat. And then the Cape May Lady is my other one for down south. So
awesome. Sorry, I think I'm having internet issues here. So as far as target species, what are some of your favorites to go for?
Want me to go first or John?
This is all you.
All right. Well, I say for me, I'm probably the best at fluke fishing right now. I just, I've been doing that for a few more seasons, but the one that I'm most addicted to right now is definitely blackfish. A good friend of mine, she loves blackfishing. The first time we went out in Rhode Island in October, so that was my first trip. And ever since then, I've been kind of hooked to figuring out that finicky bite that for the life of me, especially in New Jersey, is super duper tough. But it's like something that I want to conquer. It's like the fight of a fish that's that small is crazy. I caught 2 tog as bycatch previous black sea bass seasons, and I was so mad. I was like, "Oh, this is great! Like this fish fought so hard. I had no idea what I had on my line. I brought it up. I'm like, I don't know what this is. They're like, throw it back. It's out of season." So as soon as I had the chance to actually start fishing for them seriously, I think that's been the thing that I'm like trying to conquer now. So the best I've done is probably like a 5-6 pounder. And that was when I was fishing in Delaware. So if I can catch like, a solid 5-6 pounder in New Jersey or more, then I'll definitely, for like a first year of fishing for this fish, feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, it seems like for the better tog, you're gonna have to go offshores. It's from at least my experience. We've messed around in the back and caught some decent sized ones, but it seems like you got to get on a party boat to get to the bigger ones, or at least a boat that can get out in the ocean. So you mentioned Delaware. How what's your stretch of what's your area that you like to fish?
So I went out.
Yeah.
I went out with No Limit out of Delaware. They're in Rehoboth Beach. So that was again like a 6-pack trip. Went out 3 times with them now. Went out with them once in December, and then once in April, and then once in May. And every time we went out, like we were just on the fish. The bite was, there was times when it was completely dead, right? Sometimes they like to chill during slack tide. But when the bite was on, like the one trip we went on in April, we literally limited out in probably the first hour and a half. It was just nonstop pulling up 4 or 5 pounders, like it was nothing. And some of the guys on the trip pulled up 9, 10 pounders. I didn't get a big one, but it was like the solid fish. So that was my chance to kind of practice, jig fishing. And so that captain's a really good captain, Captain John Azzato. And then his mate, Alex, he's a funny dude. So he just keeps us laughing all day with the story. So I would definitely say if you're in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, that's a solid boat to go on.
So is Delaware the furthest south you've gone, or?
It is. Yep. So I want to try a Maryland trip. If I can get on a Maryland trip sometime this year. I hear the bite in Maryland's pretty good. I don't know if you might have heard about Kelly Milano, who pulled up the women's record with the 18-pound tog on a boat in Maryland. So, now I kind of have my sights on Maryland. If that's where the fish are, I'll go.
So Rich is throwing in some questions here, so we'll throw this one up here, which is kind of what I was hinting at before. He says you target a lot of species. Which one have you traveled the farthest?
Ooh, I think the farthest has been blackfish. Going up to Rhode Island, it's probably like a 5-hour drive. So yeah, that would definitely be blackfish. This is not on the boat. I also do pier fishing too. So like before I really started getting on the boats, piers was kind of how I learned because I want to fish from land. So I've gone down and fished in Florida, but again, that was just from a pier. So that was cool doing some pier fishing for snook.
That's definitely a bucket list fish for me. I want to get on some snook.
Yeah, and they're really like striped bass. Like it's fun.
Striper's one of your favorites, huh?
Mm-hmm.
How about with tog fishing? What is your favorite style? Adam wants to know.
Oh, I'm starting to learn. So I'm a little bit addicted to the jig bite. For me, I have a lot of energy. So like sitting absolutely still is really, really tough for me. I think that's probably the toughest thing about black fishing, like trying to stay completely still, especially in New Jersey. Like you can kind of get away with moving the weight a little bit, moving your rod a little bit and repositioning when you're in those places where the fish bite a little more aggressively. But having that jig and being able to work the water and kind of, play around with it and work more areas and cover more ground, I'm thinking like I like that. And, I'm fishing on, a light little tsunami slow pitch rod. So anything feels amazing on that. Like I just started using slow pitch rods last year, mainly for fluke fishing, but using it with the spinner with a jig is just, it makes everything more exciting. Even if it's 2-pound fish, it still feels like a monster on a slow pitch jig.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of my favorite reasons for fishing the jigs. So you mentioned slow pitch rods. What's your go-to gear for tog?
Right now, so I'm using the Phoenix Titan is my rig rod. That thing, I love it. It's technically a long fall rod, so it has a lot more. I think it's a heavy or extra heavy. But it has a lot more backbone, but it still has a let's see where the camera is there, a very sensitive tip where it's like, if a fish just bumps the line, I can still feel it, but it's strong enough where I can still throw easily. Like I think I've tested it with putting 20 ounces of lead on it, and it still handles it well. So that's like my go-to rig rod. Now when I'm doing the jig, I'm using the Tsunami. I think it's a trophy series, like simple, like $100 rod, like nothing super duper duper expensive, but it's comfortable, it works, it handles the fish well. But I would say Phoenix right now has kind of become my favorite rod brand, besides going custom, which I know a lot of the guys go custom, and I'm kind of like gear acquisition syndrome. I'm a guitarist too, so it's always like, oh, there's something else I could buy. Let me see how this works. So I'm like kind of thinking about, do I want to try a custom rod next year? We'll see. But yeah, I would say the Phoenix rod series is one of my favorite ones. Now for fluking, honestly, I'm like in Jigging World Nexus. That's my yes. I love that rod for fluking. That's like nothing, like using the slow pitch is fun, but when I'm like, I feel most confident with that Nexus. Like it's a perfect balance of like stiffness but sensitivity, and we can catch like anything on it. They had a Nexus. I was on a Just Saying boat on Saturday for striped bass, and they were using Nexuses for striped bass. Like we're pulling up 33, 35, 37-inch bass, on a Nexus. So if it can handle a bass, it can handle a fluke, it can handle tog. That's a good rod.
Now for fluke, Go ahead, John. Sorry.
So if you look into custom rods next year, just so you know, and you like the Phoenix blanks, they put out a blank series to have custom rods built by their series. So they're a great one. And then you were saying Jigging World, they also put out blanks now. In the past, I don't believe they ever did, which was always a challenge. But that's something me and you can actually talk about off subject. So go into detail about it. And even if you don't use me, I could care less. But if I could tell you this is what you want, then go get it built by someone. At least you'll be happy with it.
Yeah, John will definitely hook you up. And I did not know that Jigging World offered blanks, so we will definitely be talking, John.
Yeah, it took a long time, but they finally got out to that. I think maybe 2 years ago, right before COVID. So
okay,
they had the one that we caught, the rod that we caught the most stripers on Saturday was a custom Jigging World blank.
Okay.
So yep, you definitely speak to that.
Now for fluke, what is your go-to? I know you said the Nexus, but are you using spinning or conventional or
conventional? Yeah. So for me, I think it's probably because all the largemouth bass fishing I was doing when I first got started, I got really comfortable with bait casters. So once I got off of using spinners, it was bait caster everything. So I actually have this old Daiwa Tatula 100, the high speed reel. Literally, this thing is, I want to say from 2015. It's a freshwater reel. I've been using it for sea bass, been using it for fluke, everything. Like, I'm just like, I love this reel. It's busted. I done lost the little knob cover to the handle, but I absolutely love that reel. It's caught me so many fish. So I definitely say anything bait caster, anything Daiwa. So that Tatula 100, I use it a lot. I have the 300 size, so if I'm going to a little bit more deeper water. And then I have like a Go Mexus, which is a lever drag reel. I wanted to test it out if I like lever drag before I went expensive with Saltiga, because it's a big investment. So I've always done star drags or bait casters and didn't know how I would feel about it. But that's a pretty solid rig. That's been my go-to blackfish rig reel.
So my question is, with that being said, with you using a bait caster and using a conventional type setup, a lot of people don't realize, like, you jump on some party boats or you jump on a charter boat, and typically out of common courtesy, what they'll do is they'll put you on the drift, and one side of the boat you'll be dragging bait, the next drift you'll be casting out the bait. What is actually your preference on you like dragging bait or casting?
I think I like casting better, and like the dragon bait is like, if I have to I will, but my go-to is I'll use a bucktail and let it go under the boat. Like, I've caught my biggest fish was like almost an 8-pound fluke when bucktailing like a 4-ounce bucktail, and it was going under the boat, but stopping it just because the angle, I'm trying to be where the camera at, the angle of how it was flowing was probably more straight up and down because of where I was sitting at the boat. So biggest fish I've caught underneath the boat, still jigging though. Dragging bait, it's not my preference. I definitely like jigging. Whatever route I go, I prefer jigging.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'd have to agree to that. I'm not a big party boat person, but I always hated being on the drag side. I'd rather cast.
Yeah. How about you?
Me personally, I'd rather be casting all day. If I jump on a boat where I know, okay, this guy doesn't change the drift, 90% of the time, and that's a subject that I want to bring up actually here shortly, Ed, if that's cool with you. I like showing up early and getting my side of the boat where I know I'm going to be. So, and that's one of the things that I want to lead into next, is because I don't want to break off the subject, as far as that. Party boat fishing, let's touch base with that. What time do you want to show up, tip wise, all that stuff, let's go into a little bit of detail about the party boat fishing and your experiences with that.
Yeah, the earlier the better. I think I learned that probably the hard way. When I first started, I pretty much was on the Jamaica 2 a lot. So it was like the big Jamaica, and then I tried Jamaica 2 for fluke fishing. And so I stayed on that boat for a couple of years. And so last year was me like venturing out and trying other boats, where every boat kind of has its own like time when, the big guys, the Sharpies, whatever, they get there early and get their spots. So I think I was going out for a sea bass trip on Big Mohawk, and I got there like an hour and a half early it was comfortable. I still, kind of got a good spot kind of towards the front. Well, when it flipped to fluke season, I thought that hour and a half early was sufficient. They barely squeezed me in. I'm in the middle of the boat next to, dad with the 4 teenage kids. And and I'm not saying the kids can't fish, but we know that sometimes, you end up next to the families when you're in the middle. It tends to be the guys who know what they're doing, guys and girls who know what they're doing. They're in the front or they're in the back. So I've kind of gravitated towards staying towards the front of the boat. That's kind of like my spot. I think in this wintertime fishing, because this was the first winter that I fished, that's when I kind of explored fishing the back just to be protected from the wind. But I would say you're looking at, if you want to get a good spot, minimum, depending on the season, get there 2 hours early. Now, for some boats, I'm getting there 3 hours early. I think, Big Mohawk, once I realized that mistake of only getting there an hour and a half early, I said, fine, not a problem. Boat leaves at 7. I'll get there at 3:15. Well, I got there at 3:15 and I was not the first person. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Why are you guys up? Why are you here? I'm thinking like 4 hours early would be sufficient. So it kind of depends on, especially because that boat is a boat where you got to pay cash. You can't. And for me driving from Philly to get over to New Jersey, I honestly prefer to do the online ticket because I want to make sure I'm getting on the boat I'm trying to get on versus, showing up there and then, we're out of space. You got to go find another boat last minute type of situation. So Mohawk is one where you're fluke fishing. You probably want to be there 2-3 hours early for fluke. You can get away with an hour and a half, but I think on the safe side, generally, I average about 2 hours early when I'm going out on a boat, on a party boat.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because my first experience with the Big Mohawk, I talked to somebody beforehand that always fishes it. Like, yeah, show up a couple of hours early. So I'm thinking, all right, boat leaves at 5:30. Show up at 3:30. I show up, the boat's almost packed at 3:30. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh yeah, you should have been here at 1 a.m. Yeah. I'm never doing this again.
Yep.
That is way too early for me.
Yeah.
Now, are you like? I mean, for me, when I'm going fishing, the night before, I'm barely sleeping. Like I'm like excited, like a kid in a candy store. Like is it Christmas tomorrow? Like, so I don't even sleep. So when I have to get up and be at a boat at 1 o'clock, it's like I'm barely getting an hour nap for real before I'm on the road, out the door at midnight type of thing. You can waking up at 11 o'clock at night. Like that, it's a whole. You have to kind of schedule your night to act like a grandma or a grandpa to get up so early to get a good spot on the party boat. So that's the tough part. I will say you can catch fish. Like I've seen guys catching fish in the middle of the boat, but the experience really is the fishermen sometimes you're fishing next to in the middle of the boat can sometimes make that a little bit more challenging, cross lines and, so on and so forth. The ones that are kind of getting drunk in there to actually party, versus fish. I feel like that happens a lot more with the folks in the middle.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to what you said is, your experienced Sharpies are showing up early to get those spots on the front and back. And then the people that are, just showing up that are there to fish or whatever, they don't really have a clue what's going on. They have to fill those spots in the middle. And unfortunately, it is what it is.
Yep.
So with that being said, where's your favorite spot? Bow, midship, stern?
Definitely bow. So I would say starboard bow is my spot. I'm like pretty much always on any boat. That's kind of where I'm going. If I have to start kind of shifting down and getting closer to the middle, I will. But definitely, I'm more comfortable in the bow.
Gotcha. Now Don's asking, jigging a single bucktail or a high-low rig?
Oh, high-low rig. So I'm trying to branch out this year. I'm going to challenge myself to doing more of a single bucktail and going lighter. So I've been more comfortable with the 3 to 4 ounces. But once I switched last year doing more slow pitch jigging, I was dropping down to 1.5. So the lighter I'm going, now I had to kind of get used to what does that feel like, where I want to make sure that I'm floating like, that couple of inches off the bottom versus dragging a heavier jig and I'm constantly tapping the bottom. So that's the shift I'm going to make this year, or test it out, I should say. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and in regards to that, the lighter the line you have on your reels, it'll make it a little bit easier. You'll be able to feel a little bit more, and it'll get down faster. Carrying that big line down makes it doesn't want to sink as fast, so that'll help.
Yeah, What line do you usually fish for when you're fluking?
What line am I using, or
Yeah. What line are
what
you using?
rig am I
Like
using?
what? No, what line
I'm
are you
I'm
using?
usually I'm usually like a 15 to 20 pound braid. Then I'll tie on, matching leader, whatever I'm using. But I'm a
Oh,
single
nice.
bucktail kind of person myself. How about you, John?
So you're doing. Oh, yeah.
For
Sorry.
me, some of the reels that I use togging, as far as like jigging and whatnot, I'm using fluking as well. So I don't change the braid out, unfortunately, and it'll be 30 pound. And that's on my spinning gear. My fluke, bait casters and conventional reels, they all have 20. Um, so when I'm putting a top shot on, though, it's going to be a 20 pound. I see Rich's comment there. That's only wintertime togging.
I
Um,
wasn't even gonna touch that one. I was gonna let it go.
we're not even in that subject yet, Rich. So no, when it comes to fluking, it's going to be usually a 30 pound braid, just because I'm lazy and I'm not changing the braid out constantly and wasting all that money. Get the most use out of it, and then a 20 pound top shot. Like I said, it gets down quicker. So that's just the way I fish. I like fishing, a 1.5 to 2.5 ounce, um, because I'll throw a 2 ounce on the bottom, and then I'll throw maybe like a half-ounce ball jig on top just to give it a little more weight to make it sink. Because I do different techniques when I'm out on the ocean. So I
Gotcha.
I don't like fishing the heavier jigs when I'm out there, because especially the grounds that you're fishing, especially up that way too.
It's getting snagged.
It's very snaggy. A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
don't realize you have a lot of natural structure up there. It's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
rocks, and that's where you're going to fish most of the time. So the lighter, the better.
Yep. Yep. No, I agree. I started experimenting with 10-pound braid this past year. So 10-pound braid and 20-pound top shot fluoro. And like the mates were always fussing at me, why are you using this light stuff? I'm like, I love it because I'm not getting resistance in the water anymore. Like, I'm not scoping out as much. And I think that's the biggest thing that I noticed the difference is, because before I was using probably 30-pound braid. And I'm like, this is cool. But if the guys in New York and Montauk can fish with 10-pound braid, I feel like we can probably do it in, central and north New Jersey, right? So yeah, 10 or 15 is usually my go-to if I'm fluking.
Gotcha.
Sorry, my internet's acting up here, guys. All right, so we got. Let's see. There was a question here.
I'm wondering if it's the one that I just seen. Ed, is it from Crabbit and Fishing about knowing when you're on the bottom?
Yes, I
Okay.
was trying to post it. I lost it. So,
Okay.
but yes, he
So
was asking when to know when you're on the bottom.
Gotcha. So as soon as I start to see that line kind of make a little bow, then I know I hit the bottom. Right? You're not floating in the water. Depending on how heavy the jig is, a lot of times I can feel it too. So if I'm using 3 or 4, I can easily feel the bottom. I think as I've been doing togging more and actually experimenting more with the 1 ounces and the 1.5 ounce, it's also the sensitivity, I think, of your line and of your rod. To be honest, so I'm using the slow pitch stuff. I feel like if a fish coughs on the line, I can feel it. So even a 1 ounce jig, if your gear is sensitive enough, you can feel it hit the bottom very, very softly. But as soon as your line stops coming off the reel and it is a bow in it, you hit the bottom, and you just have to kind of pay attention to when the current starts sweeping it up off the bottom, and you're casting out, especially if you're casting off away from the boat.
I would definitely agree with that. That's perfect. Um, so what do you have upcoming? Anything good? Any trips planned? Anything?
Yeah. I have a trip up to Nantucket to do some fluking. So that will then be the furthest I'm going for a fishing trip on a boat. So that's a charter party with this fishing group that I joined last year, Fish Finders. So fishing with like Garrett Weir. He's an amazing fisherman and knows a lot of fishing guys and captains. So yeah, so that's gonna be probably my next big exciting trip. Then Fluke just opened up. Sea Bass is about to open up, so I'm definitely going to be doing some local stuff in between that trip. And then I have another trip with another fishing group that I'm in, Deep Sea Fishing Crew, and they're doing a trip down to North Carolina Father's Day weekend. So driving down there to get on the Captain Stacy. So that will be another party boat. So experiencing more party boats in other states. Oh, you know what? I'm lying. I did go on a party boat in in the Outer Banks. So that again, it's I think there's an 8 hour drive. So that's actually the furthest drive I did on a party boat versus when I went up to Rhode Island for Togging. So going back down to North Carolina again and going all the way up to Nantucket. Those are my two next big trips.
You are all up and down the East Coast. That is so awesome.
My day job, I'm a consultant, so I travel all the time, and like it's always a hit list thing for me. Like, let's knock off other states, travel different states, and so once I started fishing, it's been I want to catch a fish in another state, something I can't catch at home. So I want to get on some snapper.
That is awesome. So Adam posted a question here. He wanted to know what boat you think is the best for Tog.
Ooh, I really like the Osprey. So Osprey, they're in New York, but they come down to New Jersey for the tall season. So that was a really good boat for Jersey. Um, I think Ocean Explorer is actually pretty good too. I didn't personally have really good fishing days on Ocean Explorer. I just picked like crappy weather days, and that's one of the things too. Like sometimes the conditions are just against you. It can be the best captain in the world who knows what he's doing, knows how to anchor. Like what I like about the Ocean Explorer captain is he's a diver, so he knows what topography looks like. He knows what everything looks like in the water. So that's a solid boat. I know I've seen guys that they're pretty much always catching, but some days you have some bad days. So I would say Osprey, Ocean Explorer. If we're talking Jersey party boats, those are two good ones to me.
Awesome. My computer is not cooperating. John, if you could.
Yeah, no problem. So I think the next couple things that we should touch base on is a couple other species and party boat fishing, and then if we can, let's start drifting into some of the charter boats and go into that a little bit more into detail. So as far as party boat fishing, have you done any tuna fishing, tile fishing, anything like that, and any suggestions when it comes to that gear you're using, all that type of stuff?
All right, so for tuna, I went out on a 6-pack, not a party boat.
Okay.
So I can't speak to that. And tile fish is on my list for this year, so I'm probably going to go on a tile fish trip. The Voyager is the one I'm planning to go on.
Okay.
In July. It was between honestly the Big Jamaica, because they're again a solid boat. They're catching fish. They just went on a trip this past weekend, and they limited out on tile. So that's going to be my next probably boat, the Voyager, to try for tile this year.
That's good. And it's actually funny that you mentioned that. A coworker of mine, he's a big fisherman himself, and he fishes on the Jamaica a lot himself, and I think he was on that trip, so I should be expecting
really?
a nice fillet of golden tile myself.
There you go. So now, do you tile fish a lot?
Now, for me, I'm actually, it's funny, as much fishing as I do, I am pretty much strictly inshore. I have never caught a tuna, never caught a mahi, none of that yet. This year, the tuna is on the list. I have that trip lined up. And they do stop off tile fishing on the way back in. So I will have that little bit of experience this year. To what I'm told, though, when you're tile fishing, you want the electric reel. I'm telling you now.
I know. It goes to the gear again. I was like, do I really need to buy a whole nother reel? Like, it's been like more. It's like, man, this is a habit. But I thought if someone told me if you catch a world record or any type of record, you can't use an electric reel. Is that true? You have to hand crank it up.
Yeah, it's you can't. You're gonna have to hand crank it up. It can be a pain. So the other suggestion that I'm going to say is, as far as the tile fishing, to what I'm told, is if you can't get the electric reel, find yourself a nice 2-speed reel that can handle it. And to what I'm told is a lot of guys like those Max L's for the price point. So if you want to go that route, I mean, it's going to be a fight, but it's especially if you hook into that 40, 50-pound golden, it's going to be a crank. So if you're going to go that route, if you're going to hand crank, get yourself a 2-speed and an 8-foot rod, to what I'm told too. That way you have some leverage. You can just rest the rod onto the rail and just start cranking. So
Got it. Got it. Now, do you have the gear set up for your trips?
not at all.
Okay.
I guess the boat that I'm going on, those guys have all the gear. They have Penn Internationals. They have the stand-ups. They have jigging rods. They have everything possible for
Yeah.
these trips that I'm going on. So I know I'll
Nice.
probably be building a rod for the one guy for before the trip. I'm sure that's what's going to happen, but we'll see. I might even have something up there that I can use.
Yeah.
Just that's a part of being the rod builder. You always find yourself building something, and it's like, why
Something.
do I even have this? So,
That's cool.
so yeah, as far as that, and then the other thing, and it's funny because we actually talked about that too. And one species that's overlooked in New Jersey, and it's always a hit or miss, and it just popped in my head, is cod. Me and you were talking about that back and forth a little bit.
Yes.
And I think you said you're heading up north for a cod trip in June or July, correct?
No. Well, so I'm heading up north for a tog trip,
Okay.
but that's going to be later on in the year, so like in October. But no, I want to go on a cod trip. So I'm like, I whenever I go up there, I have to find time to catch a cod.
Yeah.
It's also been just the days I've gone out. It just seems to have kind of been like sucky days. Like I went out on the Dauntless. It was just a bad day that day. Like they literally caught, I think, 40 cod the day before, and then we go out and the wind and the waves are crazy. Like not what they forecasted at all. Nothing's really biting. So yeah, that's the goal. Go up north. There's a well, I call it a mini party boat. Wisecracking Charters.
Yes.
There's another YouTuber, Fishing Grubs. Like I follow him and watch him a lot. So I was like, I want to get on that boat and try that out. They're always catching cod. So that's probably a next trip sometime this year.
Gotcha.
That sounds
Now-
like an awesome trip.
Hey, Ed's back. All right, the internet's working.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. That storm just rolled through, so everything's kind of weird.
Yeah, I told you. That's why. And it's funny. We were backstage beforehand, and even before you got on, Kristen, my internet started acting funny. The wife was having problems with her laptop while I'm on. My music was cutting out, and I said, "Listen, I'm going to cut my internet out real quick and bring it back up." And I think it was because of that storm. So just bear with us, folks. It's a little bit, unfortunately, of a problem we're dealing with.
Yeah.
So, Ed, are you going to take back over, or do you want me to keep going, bud?
No, I thought you said you had another question for her. You had a two-part question there.
Well, we're going to start moving on to charter boats, I think, is the next thing, because I feel like we touched a little bit about the party boats, a little bit about etiquette, times to show up, your gear, a species, and what boats you want to jump on for the species that you're looking for, too. So I think maybe we can move on to the charter boat portion next. So, yeah, Ed, if you want to take back over, bud, it's all you, man.
Yeah. So as far as the six packs, the charters, what are some of your favorites to jump on there?
Yeah, so I know you had John asked earlier about tuna. So I went on a Jersey Nets. That was my first 6-pack ever. They actually did it for my birthday in July. That was a 26-hour trip, and like it started off slow. So the first day was actually my birthday. They let me go first in rotation. So we're just trolling. It was nothing for like a couple of hours, and that was the first time I've ever been on a boat where we're trolling, right? Because if you're on a party boat, you're the one who's in control. You're either deep dropping or you're casting out and jigging. There's no trolling on a party boat. So that was the first time I experienced that. So I'm like, oh, so I really didn't need to bring, rod. I had a Daiwa Proteus that I was going to use as my jig stick. I was watching a lot of guys on the West Coast fish for tuna, and I noticed that they had the Daiwa Proteus as a good tuna rod. So I said, let's try that out. Got a Pin Fathom. That was going to be my jig stick. But they had the internationals, the big old rods and reels ready for the fish. So got on it. It took probably 2 or 3 hours of trolling before we got the first fish. And man, fighting, like, it's funny because the first 2 minutes of the fight, I'm thinking this is a small fish. Like, either it was swimming with me, it didn't realize it was hooked, and then it just woke up. And I realized it was like a 45-pound fish by the time we got it in. So like I'd say going back to tuna fishing, that once you do it, yeah, it's like you came, you saw, you conquered. It's kind of feeling like that fish is so strong for how much like a 40-pound fish. So I was out of breath. I felt like I was supposed to be in the gym or something like that. Like I just did some reps. fighting a fish a fraction of the size of me, which is crazy. But yeah, Jersey Nuts, that was a really good boat. Again, those captains know what they're doing. They had good mates. So that was a really good experience. Expensive, albeit, that's the one thing about when you're going on the charter boats, that you are paying more money. But my experience is that typically you're going to catch fish. Like you can never guarantee anything, right? But because the boat is smaller, you have less people that you're competing with, like dropping lines in the water type of situation. If you're doing something like togging or fluking, and you get the opportunity to do things like trolling for tuna or striper. So that experience is definitely a different one, but a cool one, albeit. So Jersey Nets was really good for tuna. I would say I just went on a striper boat, just saying, charters in Keyport, New Jersey. They were cool. Captain John, young dude, but he knows his stuff. So that was a really good experience. Good captain, good mate. Trying to think of what other boats. No Limit down in Delaware, again, have been good experiences. Like you're going to get a more personalized customer service experience when you're doing the smaller charter boats versus when you're on a party boat. And most of the time, if you're doing a charter boat too, like I did, that tuna trip that I did was actually a makeup charter, so I knew nobody getting on it. And as a woman fishing solo, like I really didn't exactly know what I was going to walk into. Like, these guys gonna be cool, are they gonna feel some type of way that a woman's on the boat? But those guys, it was a father and son duo, and then another father and son duo, and another random guy. They're actually the ones that gave me the invite to go out on the striped bass trip that I went on Saturday. So like making those connections, having a little more of a personalized experience, having closer conversations to the guys that you're fishing with, I think is a cooler part of it, being on a charter boat versus the party boat experience.
So if you had to pick one, which would you prefer, the charters or the party boats?
Oh, I don't know. That's a hard one. I think there's pluses and minuses to both, right? The biggest minus for the charter boat is gonna be the cost, like hands down. Depending on what kind of fishing you're doing, like that tuna trip was like $1,000 trip, right? But you can go on the Big Jamaica and spend $300 and potentially not catch a fish because they only caught 10 tuna that day, or you hook into it, and now because there's so many people on the boat, lines get crossed, the fish pops off. So I think you get to meet a bigger variety of people on party boats. You get to kind of just, sometimes I like to go fishing just to kind of escape, right? Like just to get away. I want to listen to my music. I want to enjoy the scenery, be on the water. So if I just want to kind of zone out and listen to my music and tap out, then I can just be on a party boat and just, relax, right? But when you're on a charter, it's more about the relationship building and the hanging out with the people, because you're in such close quarters with six people. It's kind of like you're going to have those conversations. You're going to have more conversations and be more sociable. So,
Gotcha.
If you want to be on the fish, charter boat. If you don't care about the money and you're like, I want to catch fish, you're probably going to catch more fish and bigger fish on a personalized charter, in my opinion, than on a party boat. You have a lot more variables that can kind of interfere with you catching good fish. But if you're a good angler, you'll make it happen either way.
Yeah, and it's funny because I feel the same exact way that you feel when it comes to the party boat fishing. Yeah, you meet some great people, but there's days where I could be standing literally next to a guy and I could be in the middle of the two of them. They could be bailing fish all day. Yeah. And you're doing the same exact thing and you won't get a bite. But when you're on a charter boat, you're working a smaller piece, or, we're talking bottom fishing in general. So you're working smaller pieces and whatnot. You have a better opportunity to catch fish, but it's more a personable trip. And sometimes, though, it goes back to what Heaven and Elle was saying. You can meet some really cool people on party boats and charter boats, but then you might not meet some of the best people in the world either. And that can be some of the worst times, because say you jump on one of these open boats that's a charter boat and it's a 6-pack. Well, you have nowhere to go on this boat. You're stuck with them all day. Yep. So it's definitely, they both have their advantages and disadvantages. So.
See, and I don't have any of those experiences.
Oh, okay. None at all?
I'm sorry. I don't have any. I've never been on like a 6-pack, and I've done maybe 2 charter or 2 party boats. So
Okay.
I'm learning from you guys.
I was gonna say, what's your craziest experience? I guess, John, from a party boat, from a negative side of crazy people on a boat. You know, you don't have to say the boat name. You don't have to.
I can't say that I technically really ever had a bad experience. I think the only time was our charter got canceled. We said we were still going fishing, and the only boat available at this point was the Dauntless. And I'm not saying anything bad about the boat, but everybody wanted to go fishing that weekend. It was scheduled to be togged. They had a ton of people on there, so it turned into a ling/tog trip. Ran out, did some ling, and come back in. And unfortunately, where you end up on the boat will dictate, some of the problems that you're tangling with people. For me, the kids next to me, they didn't know too much. Tried explaining to them, hey, this is what you want to be doing. This is what you want to be using. Proceeded to still do what they wanted to do, and they're throwing diamond jigs with clam on it. They're attracting nothing but dogfish.
Dogfish.
So, the whole drill there. Me, I'm personally searching for a tog. And it was a tough bite. And finally, I hooked into a massive tog. It was probably 6-7 pounds. For that day, that was a massive tog. I get it halfway up. The kid hooks a dogfish, crosses my line, and shears it. So, needless to say, I wasn't the happiest person. I put my rod down. I'm like, are you effing joking me? And walked away because I was heated. So at that point, I was a little upset. I'd have to say that was my worst experience.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, I can't say I've ever had really too much of a bad experience.
Yeah.
How about yourself?
I think 2 experiences. One could have been, this actually I have a few. I have a few as I'm thinking of it now. All right, so we had one situation where I was on Jamaica 2. I was actually fishing next to, a guy that I fished next to a couple of times before, but I had hooked this like the first or second drop. So right in the beginning, I hooked into a big fish. Like I didn't have my drag set right. I had my bait caster. So I'm like, it's taking a while to come up. I'm like, what's going on? So I tighten my drag, I'm reeling it up, get the fish to the top. It was a crowded day, because everybody loves their boat, so that boat's packed. And so I'm calling out for somebody to come get the net. I'm like, what do I do? Like, it's a solid, 6 pound fluke. It's not like super duper big, but it was a solid fish, 5-6 pounds. And I'm like, I don't know if I should flip it. Like, I wasn't even feeling confident flipping it. Like, I'm fairly good at boat flipping, but when you're like shoulder to shoulder with people, like there's so many things that can go wrong. I don't want to hook it in anybody's face. I don't, it's like, it's too risky. So I'm like debating whether I flip it or not. Guy, he did his best. He goes and grabs a net and, he thinks he's going to do me a solid and net the fish for me. Well, at the very same time, the mate pops up and tries to grab a net. Like, what are you doing trying to net the fish? Like, and so they kind of grab it at the same time. The fish pops off the hook, and there goes my food. And then for the rest of the day, I think I hooked into one other good fish, and it was I think I might have had a short or something like that. I might even got skunked that day. So I was pissed. I was pretty heated. I was like, yo, that could have been like a pull fish. So that's the other thing. For party boats, right? Pull fishes. So, putting in, $5, $10, $20, depending on the boat, that's a pretty cool experience because sometimes you walk out, making enough money to have paid for your fishing trip. So I had won a pool 2 times last year, one time for togs, one time for fluke. And I was pretty tight because that potentially could have been a fluke pool fish because it was that slow of a day on the water. And then I had an experience another time where it's again, slow day, tog fishing. And I literally was like, I was getting dogfish after dogfish after dogfish. There was a guy, this is the time I was fishing the stern, and there was a guy towards the middle of the stern, and he was catching shorts, a few shorts throughout the day. We get to the last drop. I cast out into a different hole. I'm using the rig, and I finally get a bite. So I hook this fish. I'm reeling it in. As I'm reeling in the fish, dude to my left cast over me. I'm like, what are you doing? Cast over me. I'm like, okay, do you want to move? Oh no, it's fine. It'll be okay. He ends up crossing my line, and I go, I'm looking like, okay, this is about to be bad. I managed to flip it. I flip it with his line crossed in mine because the mate, like that boat, it was the Mohawk. They don't use like nets that much. A lot of times it seems to be they're like just flip it, like unless it's like, a 7 pounder or something crazy. So I flip it, get it in the boat with his line and everything. He almost cost me. That was my pull fish. So that was my pull fish tog. But had that had turned out another way because he had crossed my line, like I again would have had some words because it's like, dude, like what are you doing? That's not the proper etiquette when you're on a party boat casting over somebody. So yeah, those would probably be my two like most annoying experiences.
Yeah, that stings. You're a better person than I am because if I was in those situations, there would have been a lot more than words.
I'd have to agree. So it seems like a good segue into etiquette. So what are some good tips for not aggravating your neighbor on a party boat?
Yeah, I think it's especially if you're new to the boat, it's just I sit back and I observe. Sometimes I'll even ask questions, like not to play like a noob, but just like, hey, like what are you using? Like what weight are you gonna use? Especially if we're doing like bottom fishing. Don't be the person who everybody else is using 8 ounces and you're using two and you're getting everybody crossed because your line's floating all over the place with the current. So I think it's kind of awareness of your neighbors, kind of imitate a little bit. If they're people that look like they know what they're doing, see what they're doing and do what they're doing to a certain degree, so that you're not getting lines crossed. I think that's probably the biggest thing that happens most frequently is that there's somebody who just refuses to use the weight. So like when I get on a boat, most of the time, depending even if it's a new boat, I'll ask the mate, hey, like, what weight are we starting with today? And I'll use their suggestion versus just doing what I want to do because they're doing this is their job. I'm coming out here as a hobby. They know the waters. They can kind of feel when it's going to be a rough day where it might look calm on the top, but the current is going crazy, further down below. So I'll ask the mates like, what's the best setup to use, and in that way I don't get cross with people. And then I think it's just general, being nice. Like sometimes people get on the boat just kind of being like taking it too serious. Like, it's like, okay, you see the guys get on there like almost like mean mugging. That's a Philly term, but mean mugging and feeling some type of way. Like yeah, like I caught the fish and this is the fish and this like it's almost like it can be intimidating when you feel like oh these guys take it so seriously. I just one boat where there's that atmosphere at times because they only go on the longer trips on Monday, so you'll know like some of those folks like they take it so serious and it's like it's still we're coming out here to have fun. So it's not if you're new to it, don't be so intimidated by that. But it definitely I think when I first started getting on the boat, so that was a little intimidating to me. But I just try to just be chill, be nice, ask questions. Hey, what y'all using? Be courteous. I think those are the best suggestions I would say for etiquette.
That is some very good suggestions. I had another question here and I lost it again.
All right, give me a second, buddy. I'll find it for you.
The weird guy on the boat. So how who is the weird guy on the boat? You got any good weird guy stories?
Oh gosh, I have a lot of. I mean, I have a lot of weird guy stories. Like I always somehow I end up fishing next to like the loud, boisterous guy who like I was fishing on this one boat. I'm not gonna say what boat. And this guy is talking about how he went to jail and he went to jail for doing crack or something like that. And like that was always it kept coming up. Like he was drinking beers and pounding beers back. And I'm like, you know what? Oh, you didn't catch that fish because you did drugs. That's why you didn't catch the fish because you did drugs because you went to jail. Like it just constantly came up. I'm like, it's cool. We all have past, but like, why are you just advertising that you? I'm like, what? Who am I fishing next to? So I'm like, I'm just gonna be nice to this guy because I don't know what he went to jail for. Like he could be telling me he went to jail for one thing and he went to jail for a whole nother thing. So I tend to get next to some of the again when you're fishing in the front and the back of the boat, you can be next to some of the more boisterous, animated folks that are comfortable because they're regulars on the boat. So I would say, yeah, that's definitely one of my weird guy experiences. Another guy who was just telling me his whole life story, and I'm just like, okay, all right, okay, oh wow, like it's okay, and the story kept going and going and going. I'm like, I have headphones in, and he just wasn't getting it, and I'm just like, I'm just gonna nod and smile. And when is this trip gonna be over? Like those type of situations. So that happens. That happens a lot of times too.
And it's funny that you say that, Kristen, because that is the Philly way of saying I don't care.
Yep. Absolutely.
So Elle is saying she wants to fish with you, and Elle's a regular on the podcast. So we got to get you
Let's do
guys
it.
set up and
Yeah, I saw
definitely
him the other
have a
week.
trip. Same with Rich.
Yeah, let's
Rich
do
wants to
it.
get out fishing with you. He's throwing that in the chat as well.
Yeah,
So we're coming up on an hour. John, do you have anything else?
I think we're pretty much close. We'll talk backstage if you want to hang back a couple minutes after.
Yeah,
We're
sure.
gonna do our wrap up. We'll talk for a couple minutes. Um, one other thing that Rich is saying too on the boat is keep your tackle close. That's another thing.
Mhm.
And that's one thing that I could say is that, like, as far as I'm not pushing anything here, but that's why I like my custom rods. If
Yeah.
I see someone walking off with a colorful rod or something, I can
Mhm.
easily decipher and say, "Dude, you're not taking that. That's my rod."
Yeah.
Sometimes it's best to keep some of your gear very loud, I guess is the best way
Mhm.
to explain it.
Mhm.
Bright colors. I know everyone likes that blacked out rod, Rich, but if you're typically fishing on a party boat or anything like that, you want to be a little more, different, I guess
Yeah.
is the best way to describe it in your gear.
I guess on that point, one thing that I started doing to help with that standing out, rod covers. So if you don't want to go to custom route, which hit up John for some custom rods. But if you don't want to go to custom route, I would say, go on Amazon, order some loud, bright rod covers. That way you put the sleeve on, it's sitting in the rod on the ride in, it's going to be pretty loud. Like most people aren't using them. So you'll be able to see if, hey, someone's picking up a red rod cover and no one else had rod covers on the boat. So that's another way around that too.
Yeah, that's also another
That's a great
great tip.
And
So
it protects your rod too.
yeah,
Mhm.
it does. So I mean, some of those guides they are they're not cheap. Like just one guide itself. I mean, some of them now are going for $25, but we're not going to get into that. So,
Yeah.
but
All
yeah,
right.
we're coming up on this hour mark. I think this is probably a good point to close it off. If anybody else has any questions or comments or concerns, let's bring them up before we head out here. Um, Other than that, is there anything else you want to touch on, Kristen, before we head out?
No, I just say, hey, do more fishing. Like, whether it's party boat or charter, you really can't go wrong. It's just a matter of finding a good one that works for you and the atmosphere that works for you. I think, you're gonna get different vibes from different boats. Some have more of a family feel, some have more of the party guy feel, the pounding back the beers and in that type of conversation. So yeah, that's what I would say.
We do have one question, and this is with the starting tomorrow. Is if nobody it does no one here, we have sea bass opening up tomorrow. This is a good way to get out on a party boat or a charter boat. It's that time of the year. Um, Adam's asking, what's your recommendation for a sea bass boat coming up? I'll let you go, and then I might chime in on this one myself.
Cool. The two I go on the most for sea bass is Big Jamaica and Jamaica 2. But I had great times on the Ocean Explorer and the Big Mohawk for sea bass too. So like right now, even as the tog season was ending, we are catching a lot of sea bass. It seems like the sea bass bite has been crazy the last couple of years. Like they're so I caught more sea bass on a tog trip than I've caught on some sea bass trips at times. So I feel like whatever boat you choose, to be honest, you probably won't go wrong right now because the bite is just crazy.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that because I was on a TOG trip for the last day at Jersey. And let me tell you, we were looking, and it comes back to when you're looking for big TOG, it's a whole different philosophy. You're not going to catch much fish because you're looking for big fish. With that being said, when that east wind came out that day, the sea bass bite was just unbelievable because you're using, softer baits like clam and shrimp and stuff like that during, the spring tog bite. So we used clam and the sea bass. I'll tell you, it was either it went in the cooler or it went overboard because it was not of size. You just knew, and that's how big they were. So to Kristen's point, Adam, this time of year, you really can't go wrong because it's just so polluted. What's happening is those sea bass are coming offshore. They're coming into the back bays of spawn. That's why if you pull up, a grub or a mullet and look at the tail on it and it's bitten off, typically that's a sea bass sitting in the back bay because that's where they go to spawn. And then they make their way back out to the canyons. That's just the cycle of it. So you can't go wrong. Me personally, I would probably jump on the Ocean Explorer, Miss Avalon, Cape May Lady if he is going to run the trips. I know he's going to be doing some drum fishing coming up here in his tile trips. Those would be the boats that I would be going on. Again, it goes back to Bobby Quinn. He's a great captain in the aspect of he's a diver. And if any of you have ever been on his boat, he will start diving if he's anchored up. If the water conditions are warm enough, he'll just start free diving. And we're talking 60, 80 feet. He'll just go down, no tank, no nothing. He's free diving, take a look at the wreck and see what he sees, and then comes back up. That guy knows his stuff. So if you're looking to do a party boat, head out. It don't matter where you go. One suggestion I can say, and I think you can maybe agree with me a little bit on this, Kristen, is the past couple of years, the clam has been a big issue with shortage. So they're getting that artificial clam. If you can, I would stop in a tackle shop and bring your own clam just in case. Because if you start using that artificial clam, you might see people getting bites all over, but that's because they may have brought their own bait. Because they don't like that imitation stuff. That's one thing I've learned. So
that's a good tip. I did not know about the artificial clam, so say less. I will definitely bring my own.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't hurt. You could tell the difference. You'll take the clam that you bring, and then you look at theirs. It's mixed in. They'll have normal clam in there, but they'll also have artificial clam, and it has more of a pinkish rainbow tint to it.
Gotcha.
They don't chew it as much. I've learned that very quickly. So that's something I would look into. Andrew Sokol is actually pointing out too. And I forgot about this. Dave on the Queen Mary, he's actually been doing a lot of sea bass fishing the past couple of years. It's something he's starting to get into more. That is an absolutely great boat. Great captain and the customer service on that boat. He does a lot of jig fishing for sea bass, though. I don't know if that's something you do yourself. Then that's something I'm looking to get into this year.
Something I'm looking to get into. Yeah, I bought. And talking about the gear acquisition syndrome. I bought a lot of slow pitch jigs last year, and I was like, I couldn't. It didn't seem like it was really working as well up north, like in the colder water. So that's why I'm kind of excited when I go down to North Carolina to see if it's going to be a little bit different, But no, the jig fishing is something I want to get into a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. And you do seem to have a little bit more bigger fish. I actually built a whole setup around this year for slow pitch jigging, a slow pitch rod, a slow pitch reel for fluke and sea bass, because I'm going to attempt at doing fluking as well.
Yeah.
So,
you love it. It's fun on the fluke. It's fun.
It's going to be a different experience, so I'm looking forward to it myself. So,
I think we should all plan I think we should all definitely plan a group. Book out a boat or something and get going. So, all right. Well, Kristen, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you for coming on, and everybody, thanks for coming out. This was a fun one. It was my first solo one. Hopefully I didn't butcher it too bad.
I wanted to pick on you, but I wanted to beat you up a little bit. I can't do that to you though. So if the audience would have done it, I would have done it the same thing. I probably would have beat up on you just like Step Brothers. So, but with that being said, guys, Ed, I don't think we have anything else. Next week, I believe it's just the three of us. We're going to do a little bit of talking about what's going on, talking about, our experiences. I know I'm planning to get out Saturday. It's going to be, I think, me, Rich, Perry Del Rossi, and we're going to finally get Tad out in the water so he can try his big water out. I don't know if you're getting out this week or not.
You guys just don't invite me to anything, so.
Well,
No, I'm not.
our work schedules conflict. So, but yeah, we'll probably touch base on what's been happening, see what's going on out on the waters, and we'll take it from there. So, guys, we appreciate it. And Kristen, thank you again for coming on, and we'll catch you all next week.
Yep, have a great week, everybody. Tight lines.